effective tool, especially when arguments within your family have become volatile in the past. The goal for communication is to talk respectfully to one another, not scream, accuse, or belittle one another. If this has happened in your communication in the past, maybe you should try the timeout technique. When a conversation gets heated, either person can take a timeout. Once a person calls a timeout, both people stop talking and find another place to be. Perhaps another part of the house, a walk around the block, or a supportive friend's house. During this time apart, the goal is to cool off or think more clearly. After a specified amount of time, both return to the conversation so that the problem can be resolved in a respectful way. Let's be clear about something. Timeouts can be misused. There are some counselors who do not teach their clients how to use a timeout for this reason. In order for timeout to be an effective mode of communication and not to become abusive, you must follow the rules completely. Timeout only works if both people agree to the following rules. Either person can call a timeout. If someone calls a timeout, it must be for themselves, not for the other person. For example, Ronnie could say, "I need to call a timeout because I feel like I'm losing control of my conversation." It would not be okay for Ronnie to say, "We need to call a timeout because you are getting out of control." Once a person calls a timeout, there should be no more discussion of the topic. Instead, they should agree to the terms of the timeout. For example, I might say, "I'm going to take a walk around the block, and when I return in about 30 minutes, we can continue our conversation. Is that okay?" Once a timeout is called and the other person is trying to leave, it is not okay to follow that person. If the timeout has been called, it's because the conversation was getting heated. Following the person could escalate the matters and lead to verbal, emotional, or even physical abuse. Both people should try to go someplace or do something that makes them feel more relaxed and settled. This is the key to the timeout. If you leave and just think negative thoughts about your partner during the entire time you are separated, you may come back to the conversation even more heated than when you left. The goal then is to try to cool down. Try to understand the other person's perspective and think how you might compromise. Here are some things that you can do during your timeout. Take a walk, play basketball, go running, work in the garage, clean the kitchen, organize a closet, phone a friend, go get a smoothie, go to the park, go to the library, go to the grocery store, take the dog for a walk, play catch with your child, breathe deeply, think positive thoughts about your partner, listen to calming music. Again, the point of the timeout is for you to calm down. So what are things that help you to calm down or relax? But here are some things not to do during your timeout. Do not go to the bar, drink alcohol, phone a friend who hates your partner, phone a family member who hates your partner, plan during your timeout how you will win the argument, hit a pillow, hit a punching bag, listen to music that makes you feel angry or vengeful. I imagine you can think of other things that probably are not healthy choices to do during your timeout. Again, the key to a timeout is learning how to calm yourself down so you can return to the conversation and solve the issue. When it's time to return to the conversation, it's important that both people come back, or at least make a phone call to say when they will be back. If you need more time, that's okay. But again, the point is to cool off, not to be thinking of your comeback and how you will win the argument. If your partner doesn't come back or call after the agreed upon time, it's okay to call and find out when you can meet so you can continue the conversation. When you come together again, you have 3 choices. 1. You can continue the conversation in a respectful way, looking for compromise and solutions. 2. You could make an appointment to continue the conversation at another time because you need more information, time to think about things, or someone's help with something. For example, maybe you need to talk with a financial institution or a child's teacher because what you're arguing about, you just don't have enough information to make a good decision. The third option when you get back together again would be to simply drop the subject because you both realize it wasn't worth arguing about. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes we get into arguments with our partner just because we're tired or hungry or we're stressed out. However, check in with your partner and make sure it's not a subject that you simply want to drop, but they still think is important. This decision must be made together. It's unfair to come back to the conversation only to convince your partner that their point is not worth listening to. If your partner still wants to talk about things, make sure that you're listening to them. Try to understand their perspective, looking for what their needs might be. One way to do this is to let them speak first. Give them at least 5 minutes to express what they're feeling. As you listen, try to understand things from their perspective. Think about what they might be feeling. Then acknowledge those feelings. Say something like, "It sounds like you're feeling hurt," or "I can understand why you might be feeling frustrated." Be ready to suggest solutions to the problem or to suggest a compromise. When couples come back to my office and talk about what went well during the timeout and what didn't go so well, usually one of 2 things has happened when it doesn't go well. The first problem usually occurs because couples wait too long to call the timeout. For example, if you think of your argument as a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most intense argument that you can have, you don't want to wait until you get to 10 before you call the timeout. You can call a timeout earlier than that, and that way you're not so angry that it's hard to get your emotions under control and follow the rules of timeout. Most times when timeouts don't work, it's because couples have waited too long within the argument to call the timeout. The other reason a timeout might not work is because one of the partners refuses to follow the rules and go someplace else during the timeout. They follow their partner or try to convince them of one last thing before. The timeout rules need to be followed. Both people need to respect the other person's space and allow them to calm down so the conversation can continue in a healthy and respectful way. Join us for part 4 of our series on communication, which is the technique of the 10-5-10. This will help you put boundaries on your communication when you come back together after the timeout.